The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Praise God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. What a great text that the psalmist David shared with us. And I want to welcome each one of you to Wonderfully Made. Thank you for allowing us to come into your home and to minister you today and to help teach more about the bodies that God has given us. Today we have an exciting topic that I'm very passionate about, and that's the topic of sleep. And I'm glad to have with me today Mr. Daniel Miller. Dan, I'm glad you're here today.
Thank you.
Now, Dan is a businessman from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he's also a health consumer. And in talking about sleep, I think it's very useful to have someone that might have had some experience with sleep, and I think all of us have had some experience with sleep.
Right.
Can you just tell us some of the experiences you've had in your sleeping patterns over the last few years?
Well, my sleeping patterns are a little bit different than most people's. Owning a business like I do, I run the business during the day, and then at night I plan in my mind what my next day will be. Mm-hmm. And so in doing that, what I do is stay awake all night. Ooh. And so I've had to develop ways that I can get my rest and still function, which is very difficult when you don't have any rest. So that's part of the problems that I've had.
Well, how have you adapted to this? And do you think this lack of sleep has affected your health or your performance in any way, or you think it's catching up to you, or you think it's something you're tolerating well?
You know, when you have a family, it always affects the family. Mm-hmm. When you don't have enough sleep. You're grumpy the next day, you're short with people, you don't have the patience that you should have. You know, there's a number of different issues when it comes to that. As far as my performance at work, I don't think it affected that, but, you know, I can't tell you that for sure. You know, one of the ways that we deal with our sleep habits in several different ways, I guess. And the way that I have is I like it completely dark. Mm-hmm. And I sleep with a fan on. I can't sleep any other way. And so that's kind of helped me deal with some of the issues that I've had when it came to that.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about sleep. And as time has gone on in the practice of medicine, I've gone on to think that sleep is as important as anything else we do in taking care of our bodies. Right. And we're going to explore that with today's topics. One of the things that I'm now appreciating about sleep is, you know, Dan, most people spend about a third of their life sleeping.
Right.
Or trying to sleep well. Most people admit that they don't feel like they do that part of their life well, sleeping well. Now, if I asked you bluntly, do you think you're sleeping well in your life? Is that an aspect of your life that you think you're doing well?
I think at this point in time I am, because I finally developed steps that I needed to take. It's kind of a learned behavior.
Right. And
for me.
A third of us, you know, we spend a third of our time in sleep, and it's sort of a shameful admission, and I'm one of them, to admit that a third of my life I'm not living well. And yet, as Christians and, you know, living to the glory of God, we want to do as well as we can in all of our time, whether that's a sleeping time or waking time. And that's, you know, I studied some statistics recently, and 60 million Americans right now, 60 million Americans, and I'm sure those across the world have similar problems, feel like they suffer from insomnia.
Right.
And insomnia is not being able to sleep.
Right.
A couple interesting statistics that I wanted to share with you and the audience before we get started today. Did you know that a giraffe, as big as a giraffe is and as long as guess how many hours a day a giraffe sleeps?
I have no clue.
A giraffe sleeps on the average of 2 hours or 1.9 hours a day. That's an average amount that a giraffe sleeps. Now here's another animal that I thought was very interesting. Do you know how long a brown bat sleeps?
No.
A brown bat sleeps almost 20 hours a day. A brown bat spends roughly 83% of his time sleeping. We spend about a third of our lifetimes asleep. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is ways we can think about that 1/3 of our lives that we normally don't give it much thought.
Right.
So with that, let me tell the audience how we got these questions. These are people that write questions to Heartwise Ministry from all over the country. And what I'm doing is I'm grouping these into topics. And these are all questions that have to do on the topic of sleep. And I'm praying that as we talk, that everyone will look at their own sleep habits, and maybe we can make a change here or there. I don't think these changes occur overnight. I think you just try to change here, and then as you feel better, you move to the next one. So let's move on to our questions now.
All right. First question comes from Brenda in California.
Okay.
Brenda says, my doctor gave me a prescription to help me sleep at night. I still sleep poorly. Should I take a stronger dosage?
Okay. Well, Brenda, I think that a lot of people don't realize it, but I try, in this type of situation, I would want to know why does a person not sleep well at night? What is the root cause? A medication really doesn't solve the problem. It just perpetuates it. And a lot of people don't realize that when these sleep medicines came out years ago, and some of the names, one was called Halcion. I don't know if you heard of that,
right,
but they took that off the market because it was causing people to, well, maybe they didn't take it off the market, but it was associated with adverse events. The most popular one now is called Ambien, but there's a lot of other sleep aids out there. But the FAA only recommended that these medications be taken for 2 weeks or less. They've never recommended them to be taken long term.
Is it possible then that these medications are meant to reset your sleep clock? Because I at one time had taken Ambien, and for a short period of time while I was taking it, I just didn't understand how sleepy I was until I woke up one morning and realized that I was so rested. Life was totally different for me.
Well, that's possible because the sleep aids change the chemical transmitters in the brain, and they're only made really for the short period of time, and until you can look at the cause of what caused the insomnia to begin with. I'm afraid nowadays that people are staying on these years and years and years, and they're not getting at the cause, and they're
right,
all altering the chemicals, but we're never fixing the problem. We're
right,
just sort of covering it up, and that problem's going to get worse. And every chemical reaction we have in your body leads to something else.
Right.
So let's get back to Brenda for a second. Brenda, we're going to look at a graphic here that might give some suggestions to help you sleep well at night, and looking at the cause of why you don't sleep well. The first sleep suggestion that I would give to you, and you might be doing a lot of these things, is try to have an empty stomach. We recommend having a stomach empty 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed at night, because a lot of your energy goes to digesting food. Up to a third of your blood flow goes to digest the food. Also, when you lay down at night, you can have acid bubbling up, and that can affect sleep greatly. We would like you to avoid stimulants, more exercise during the day so you're more tired, avoid stress, and that's a whole other topic. Sometimes you can take a natural substance called melatonin that might aid in your sleep. Another thing that seems to help sleep is laughter. Laughter creates all these endorphins, and I wonder if Johnny Carson, slept better because he laughed so much. Sunlight increases a substance called serotonin, which aids in sleep. And of course, reading the Bible. In Ephesians 4:26, it suggests that we don't go to bed ever with anger in our hearts. These are all some suggestions that might help you a little bit in dealing with sleep, Brenda. Now, one of the things we mentioned just a second ago was stimulants. Now, what kind of things, when you were having your sleep problems, that you consider that might have stimulated your mind at night, or your whole body system that might have affected you? Because I think that's, a lot of people don't look into things
Correct.
that stimulate.
Other than just the caffeines
Right.
and so on and so forth.
Well, everyone
like
knows
that.
about the caffeines,
Right.
and everyone knows about certain medicines. What are other things
Right.
that might have added to your problem, Dan?
For myself, a child, you know.
That's right.
It came, you know, at a time when we had just had our daughter, and, you know, she was up at different times during the night, so it broke up my sleep pattern. You know, there's a whole list of different things, I would assume, and you know, you probably know more about those than I do, but you've got lights being a stimulant. You've got sounds being a stimulant. For myself, light is a major stimulant for me. Temperature, being very hot, is probably one of the major causes that I don't sleep. I like to sleep in a cool room, and so that's...
Well, in talking about a little bit more about stimulants, anything that affects the senses can adversely really affect these sleep patterns. Because remember, at night, the sleep time is a time where you're basically turning off. And anything that's coming into the senses could alter this, whether it be a sound. How about snoring next door? Does your wife snore?
No, and I'll never admit that on national.
Okay, well, I mean, you don't have to admit that, but I hear a lot of people that snore at night, so the other one doesn't get good sleep, and no one will say anything.
Yes.
You'll leave a third of your life tired and in torture, rather than say, listen, you have a sleeping problem, we need to deal with that.
Well, most people will deny that they do snore.
Right. I think lights is a good one. Sound. How about taste? I've had some people that have bad taste in their mouth, and they can't sleep from that. That's another sense that needs to be turned off. And that goes back. I think a lot of the sleep problems we have, these 60 million people, this food is a big deal. How many people eat late at night now?
I would say a lot.
Okay.
I don't know the
Now,
numbers. But.
we didn't bring up, you know, we talked about the caffeine, you know, and a lot of people don't realize that caffeine can stay in the system up to 20 hours. It's just not, you know, you drink one, you know, Coke in the morning or, you know, caffeinated beverages and it's totally out. And caffeine affects people different ways. You know, some people can get by with it. Alcohol. A lot of people drink alcohol because they think it's going to help them relax at night and go to sleep.
And is that the case?
No, it's not the case. Alcohol breaks up your good sleep patterns because it changes, again, some of those neurotransmitters that's going on in your head.
Right.
Finally, here's one big one in our society that I think needs to be talked about why Americans aren't sleeping well. And going back a third of our life, this is a long period of time. I'm very passionate about it. Why are we giving that away? A lot of people are not watching too much television.
Number one, yeah.
And I think that stimulates the mind, one way or the other, before you go to bed. I mean, you know, there's not too many good shows left anymore. Of course, you know, the shows on 3AB, and we, you know, make an exception to that. But, and also, you know, the sporting events. You know, everyone gets revved up and excited, and when you get revved up excited, those chemicals that make the stress hormones go up, and it's a whole cascade of events. So we can't turn off that clock.
You got video games.
Yeah. Video games is just a host of things.
A lot of different.
And I think in talking to people about getting good sleep, I want to encourage everyone out there to look at the stimulants you have before you go to bed. We want to turn off the senses and not turn on the senses.
Right.
Well, I think, Brenda, hope we can get at the root cause of yours. But let's go to another question now.
Let's go to a question from Max in Texas. He writes, how do I know if I'm getting enough sleep?
Well, that's a good question, since we're talking about sleep.
It's a difficult question, actually.
Yeah, and we hear this frequently. How many hours of sleep do you need to feel well, or to know that you're getting enough sleep? And how do you know you're getting enough sleep?
I don't know. Everybody's different. Bill Clinton says he only needed 4 hours of sleep per night to exist as our president.
Well, that's not very much. 4 hours, I would want him to sleep a little bit more.
But it goes back to saying that everybody is, you know, different. And
one of the things that you know, how do you know? That's a good way. And I think you have to think about it. And I think that in sleep, you have to treat sleep like a job. You want to do it well. You want to learn about your body, find out about your sleep patterns, and optimize it. And one of the things that we know is if you have to wake up to an alarm clock, maybe you're not getting enough good sleep. Okay? A second thing is if you're tired in the day, we know you're not getting good sleep. Also, frequently, people that aren't getting enough sleep are involved in more accidents.
Correct.
You know, that they do crazy stuff. They get in car accidents. We see that people that don't get one sign that might not be getting enough sleep is frequent colds. They get colds a lot and infections.
Lowered immune system.
When at night, when you don't get enough sleep, the immune system's affected. There's these cells in the body called natural killer cells. And Dan, these go around and really scarf up those things that aren't supposed to be there. We know that people that don't sleep just don't make these to the degree that people does. Another thing that might be a sign, now this is a little bit off, and you're going to have to follow me with this one, that a sign that you're not getting enough sleep is people getting fat. Now, would you believe that?
No.
People getting fat could be a sign as you're not getting enough sleep. Well, what goes on in your brain when you're not getting enough sleep, there's a hormone called growth hormone that helps people grow. And you've heard that kids grow at night when they sleep. Well, at night, that's when the growth hormone really kicks in. But at night, if you're not sleeping well, the growth hormone levels go down. And if your growth hormone levels go down, guess what happens? You're not growing, you're not metabolizing much.
So you're putting on extra pounds.
Right. And another thing that could happen, you wake up tired the next day, you're stressed out. And how do people deal with stress? Some people. I
deal with it very poorly.
But some people eat.
Yeah,
they wake up and they don't feel good in the morning, so what are they going to get? More things that adversely affect. They might get some more donuts. They might say, well, let's have a cappuccino or something to get the day going. And all along, they're not dealing with the root cause stress. Now, another thing that goes down is there's a hormone in the brain that is called leptin. Leptin's a very important hormone that says, I'm full. And if you're not making this leptin hormone, you're always not feeling this full. And this happens in people that don't sleep well.
Now, are there medications that can take over for leptin?
Not really, not that I know of.
So
it's just sleep. And when that sleep, God has made the body to need sleep. And when that sleep, you have restorative patterns, and your brain does things at sleep that it can't do during the day. It processes memories. It makes these hormones like leptin that says I'm full. It does a lot of things. The brain is a very busy place, even when you're not conscious to it.
Right.
And a lot of people, when they think about sleep, they don't think, well, my brain has to go to a different environment for a while to get its job done. So they're not letting their brain get its job done. It's like, you're working all the time.
Right.
And the brain is still working, but it's doing a different type of work.
And see, that goes back to what I was having problems with. My brain never shut down at night.
Right. And in different parts need to work. And other things, have you ever heard the comment that I need my beauty sleep?
Yes.
Do you know that studies have shown that people that don't get sleep age much faster? They get wrinkles, the full 9 yards. And it's sort of the same process we're talking about. Resting, I view resting as therapy for many things, okay? In the Bible, Genesis 2, the God of the universe worked 6 days, and then what did he do?
Right, he rested.
He rested a full day. And he set up day and night. And if this rest was good enough for him, there must have been a master plan.
Correct.
And we see, well, why do we get all these diseases? Why do we have all these problems? Why do we have all these stress? Well, one of the problems, I think, is not getting enough sleep. So getting back to Max's question, some of the things we talked about, the alarm clock, or the tired, the accidents, the frequent health problems. If you're Max, are you getting wrinkles early? Maybe that's a sign. But all these might be a sign that you're not getting enough sleep.
Right. All right, let's go to Fred in North Carolina. He says, my wife told me that I have sleep apnea. She is not a doctor, but does read a lot.
Oh, okay.
There you have it. Could she be right?
Well, Fred, take it from a man that's married. My wife is always right. And you're going to have to treat it that way.
Mine is too.
Fred, you're going to have to just treat it that way. Your wife is right. And in this case, Fred, off the record, she is right about this one. You could very well have sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is a medical condition where at night you don't breathe. Okay? Sleep apnea. Apnea means periods where you're not breathing at night. Mm-hmm. And the sort of characteristic breathing pattern is they do that over and over and over. And physiologically, when that happens, the oxygen levels go down in the body.
Right.
So the tissues don't get renewed. You can have high blood pressures in the lungs. It can cause all sorts of problems. The heart has to pump harder. It can cause funny heart rhythms. Numerous things. Recently, sleep apnea, they say, what was that football player, the Green Bay Packers, Reggie
White.
Reggie White. He actually had sleep apnea, is a big old strapping guy, very young. He had this as a complication. Nowadays, Fred, a lot of people are walking around with sleep apnea, and they walk around it their whole lives, and they never realize they don't have it. The cells of the body aren't getting enough oxygen.
Right.
So the symptoms of sleep apnea, Dan, people that have it, they're tired all the time. They have headaches.
Right.
They could have high blood pressure. They're irritable because they're not sleeping. They make lots of mistakes. It's a major problem.
A difficult thing
It's
to
a
go
difficult
through.
problem.
I had a cousin at one time that had this same situation, and he would go to sleep at a red light. Wow. And people would have to come and wake him up to get him to go through the red light. So I thought that was kind of a dangerous situation. And
how's he doing now?
He's he's taking care of it.
Okay. Now we have a video, a slide that we want to show up about this, different aspects of sleep apnea, and going over the consequences. What happens when you have sleep apnea? We talked about the fatigue, being tired all the time. Headaches might be a symptom. High blood pressure. We talked about the abnormal heart rhythms, and we put strain on the heart because it has to pump against such high pressures in the lungs. So sleep apnea is a problem that we need to deal with it. Now,
what are several ways that they applications that they use in the medical field to deal with sleep apnea?
A couple things that are very, I think the most useful thing is losing weight and exercising. They say that if you can lose about 15 pounds, often you can treat sleep apnea successfully, but usually it's because of the airway. There's too much pressure on it, or the muscle tone in the tongue is poor.
Right.
Sometimes they can cut an area in the back of your throat to let more air in and out. But the most common type of treatment is where they put a mask over it's called a sleep mask, and it blows air in. Right. And what I try to do in the management of sleep apnea is hit it on two folds. I try to get at the root of the cause. If it's weight loss, lose weight. If it's sleeping in a different position, as well as placing the mask until they can do that.
Right.
And people that wear the mask, it's a pain to wear it, but they feel so much better. For the first time in years, they've had rest. Right. It's amazing. So
now would Fred, who's up in North Carolina, would he take what his wife says for granted, or would he go to a sleep center where they would be able to help him a little bit?
Dan,
more discerned.
What would you do in this situation?
I think I'd go to the sleep center.
I think I might. What I would do, Fred, is I'd tell my wife, I said, honey, you're probably so right, and I think you're so right that I'm going over to the sleep center, and they're going to watch me when I sleep, and they'll hook me up to oxygen monitors, and they'll see if my oxygen level goes down in the middle of the night, and if I meet criteria for sleep apnea, then I'll have aggressive treatment for this. If this goes on untreated, it creates tons of health problems down the road. So I hope that answers your question, Fred. That's what I would do.
All righty. The next question comes from Dave in Reno. He says, is there a difference between resting and sleeping? I rest a lot, but sleep only a little.
Wow. Dave, this is one of the most difficult questions I think I have to answer in sorting through resting and sleeping. You can be asleep and not get good rest.
Right.
And also, you can rest and not sleep. So, in answering your question, Dan, what I've been trying to do in the treatment of people is, how do you know what's true in life? You know, you see, eat this diet, high-fat diet, low-fat diet.
Or about it being fed everything through the
media. You know, how do you know what's true? This medication's so good for you, then you take it off the market. So what I do when it comes to tough questions, I try to turn to the Bible and see if the Bible gives us insight, like the day of rest. You know, that only makes sense. I'm turning to God for our answers. The diet, you know, Daniel and his friends, the diet they eat. But I want to throw some text up here in our next slide here, give some text that I wanted to share with Dave that might help him a little bit. Sleep does not necessarily equal rest. And one of the texts I like to share is Matthew 11:28. And that's the text that says, "Come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." What do we have to do? We have to come unto him, and I will give you rest. That's a gift. So I will give you. Now, that's not necessarily sleep, but that's a rest in itself. Right. I will give you rest. Psalms 37:7 again talks about rest. And then there's Genesis 2, verse 2, where it says that God worked for 6 days, and God of the universe, of the whole universe, what did he do for one day?
He rested.
And I don't think he slept at all. I mean, he might have slept, but he rested. So understanding what God means by rest, I think it's all about, you know, our spirituality, you know, to have that rest, that peace, where that mind is allowed to work on other things.
Right.
Brings to mind one more text that I wanted to share with everyone. Hebrews 4:9 says, "There remains therefore a rest for the people of God." I think that when you have God in your life, there's a certain rest that you cannot attain any other way.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
We've got one more question.
Okay.
I'm a truck driver, and my shift is at night. I sleep during the day. I am 45. Is this hurting my overall health?
There's so many different aspects that could be talked about here. There could be a chance, if you're not resting well during the day, that it could affect you. Have you ever worked shift work? Have you ever had to work night?
I really haven't,
Okay.
no.
Well, this is a very question that's very dear to me because I do stay up at night. And Tuesday night is my call night as long as weekends. And I never sleep well on that night. And I do think it affects my health.
Right.
Because when you break that night-day cycle, that's not natural. And when you disregard one of sort of God's laws,
right,
you're going to have some consequences. And the consequences that we're talking about are the circadian rhythms. You've heard that term.
Yes.
The night, day. God created that. At light, we have a substance. When light comes into us, a sleep substance is made called melatonin. Mm-hmm. And this is released from the pineal gland, and this actually helps us sleep a great deal. So I think that when you break this cycle, the light-day cycle, these natural chemicals that help you have true rest is disturbed, thrown off. And then you get these subsequent health problems that we sort of identified with that adversely affects everything.
I've also heard that night shift work basically affects your whole quality of life long term.
And it's probably the same mechanism of this light, melatonin, pineal, all this is probably an associated.
Combined.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly covered a lot about sleep today, Dan. I want to thank you for joining us.
I appreciate you inviting me. I've had a great time.
Well, good. A couple final thoughts I want to leave everyone with is that sleep is an important part of our lives. And we spend a third of our life resting or sleeping. We need to do it well and to the glory of God. We need to think about our sleep patterns, do it right, spend some time thinking about it like we've done today, and just not sort of haphazardly let the years go by and then all of a sudden figure that out we have health problems because we didn't sleep. The second thing I want to leave everyone with is poor sleep could certainly be because of stimulants. We have too many stimulants in our life, too many stressors. We've talked about TV, eating big at night. We've talked about caffeine that 80% of the United States is now taking. Now, finally, the last thing that we want to talk about is the true rest, the real peace that comes within. It comes from walking with God. Come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. What a wonderful promise for us today.